Let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahushai, Ba'Hashem Rachak Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. This one is The Receipts Bear Witness. I was watching a video the Elder Pastor R did called, I believe it's the 10 tribes came here long before Columbus or something along those lines. And he was mentioning the navigator that came with Columbus called Luis de Torres, right? Lewis of the Tower. And pretty much, it just got me to go and look him up again. We've done lessons on this before, and I just wanted to just touch on that, make a few points, and see where the Spirit leads it. Because the more these devils deny, who the Israelites are, the more the receipts stack up, and the receipts bear witness. When you had individuals that come to this side of the world, like James Adair, who was among Gad and traded with them. I'm not sure if it was 40 years or so. He even came to the conclusion that these Gadites are Israelites based off of their customs, their language, certain things that they would do, the way they would keep, the land, and just different things in general on how they conducted themselves that proved that they were Israelites. And even in that book, now I don't know if it was a form of broken Hebrew, or they later changed it up, to kind of throw it off a little bit. But he said that the Gadites that were here, so-called North American Indians, called the Most High's name Yehovah. All right, they called his name Yehovah, and they called Yahushua's name is Yehoshai. All right. Now we don't know if they altered that and just threw the spelling off a little bit, or if that's how they were saying it, because by that point, the Gadites that were already here, they were going off, the Hebrew language is kind of broken, so they didn't keep it, pure, because part of the prophecy is that the Lord was going to return to us this pure language, and that we would be speaking this language in these last days, in these lands. Romans 8:16 says, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. All right, and that's why certain things that Israel does is witness, or you could call them receipts of who the children of the Most High are, just based off certain things they do. And this is why they were calling the Most High's name Yehovah, even though the Most High's name is Yahweh. And a lot of different customs that they were doing and different words that they were using that came from the Hebrew language. And I watched about 31 minutes so far of the video. So I'm pretty sure the pastor went into the Los Lunas Decalogue stone that's here in America. I can't remember everything exactly how it was said, or how he said it, but in that stone, you have the 10 commandments. That's why it's called the Decalogue. Deca meaning 10, log, like saying word. Decalogue, 10 words or 10 commandments. And I believe I heard him saying something that they thought it was upside down or something along those lines, but it's because they didn't understand the language. So my question, that's one of many, is how did that stone get here? And why did it have Hebrew writing in it and not Moabite writing? If we descended from the Mongols, us so-called Latin tribes, Native American Indian tribes, if we descended from the Mongols and from the Chinese or Japanese or whatever you guys out there say, why wasn't that Decalogue stone or the 10 Commandments stone written in Chinese or Japanese or any other, so-called Asian writings, Mandarin, whatever the case may be? Why was it written in Hebrew? Inquiring minds want to know. Now they could come back and say, well, the original Japanese and Chinese were, Hebrews, which they're correct on that, but there came a point where they weren't speaking that language anymore. They're speaking a different language. especially by that time. But anyways, nevertheless, oh, and by the way, they weren't given the Ten Commandments. How about that? Moab and Ammon were not given the Ten Commandments. Only the nation of Israel. All right. There was another matter of fact. Let me go to the other one that I quoted in the book of Isaiah, and these are key points in prophecy and scripture that are receipts, which are pretty much receipts are, you know, evidence of who the people of the Most High are, because the Lord left, certain certain markers, so to speak, that we would identify with today, so that the children of Israel could be identified, because we would be brought back, you know, back to our nationality, back to our language, back to our heritage, our customs, so on and so forth. And that's what we're witnessing right now. So in Isaiah 19 and 18, it says, "In that day, 5 cities," which is not representing five exactly, but it's a representation of a certain amount of places, especially here in America. "In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt." This is dealing with the modern day Egypt. When you go to Revelation 11 chapter, that spiritual Egypt is talking about here in America. It's not talking about Jerusalem, and it's not talking about the Lord Yahushua being crucified in Jerusalem as he was 2,000 years ago. All right, it's talking about over here in the Americas, and the way he was crucified here was by being crossed out and being given a different appearance and a different name, that his actual appearance and his actual name. So it says, "In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan." And what is the language of Canaan? All you have to do, go to Google right now, pause the video, go to Google right now, and type in language of Canaan. And what you're going to see is the ancient Hebrew, the Paleo Hebrew, the Lashawan Kodash. That's what you're going to see. They call it Canaanite or Phoenician writing, or whatever the case may be, because remember, all nations at one point were speaking that one language, and that's why you have different nations that had that similar style of writing, which is called the Paleo Hebrew, Canaanite, Phoenician, or whatever you want to call it. So it says, "In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan." So the Lord would return back to us this pure language, mainly to call upon his name. Now, we don't speak the language perfectly. We could, if we put our head to it, we could have just studied all these years and had and been experts in the language. But the point is, the main thing we're focused on is the scriptures and the prophecies of the scripture. Not the language itself. With the language that we have, the Hebrew, the Lashawan Kodash, which the word Lashawan Kodash, Lashawan is tongue, Kodash is holy. We have a working knowledge of how to get around the Hebrew and read certain things and break certain things down. But the main purpose of the Hebrew language being revived again in us is to call upon the names of Yahweh, which is the Heavenly Father's name, and Yahushai, which is the Heavenly Father's Son's name. Those are the main two names that we need. Everything else that we know in the Hebrew is gravy, and there, we've done lessons in the Hebrew, which nobody watches, but you learn it on your own at your leisure. So let me read that again. "In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, and swear to the Lord of hosts. One shall be called the city of destruction." Right. So pretty much that's what is being done right now. It says, "In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai in the midst of the land of Egypt." And what is that altar? The truth. What you hear being preached in the housetops right now, which started in Harlem, New York, USA, America. Okay, Babylon the Great. That's where this knowledge started from. The knowledge that of the Hebrew Israelites that's being attacked on all fronts did not start in the land of Israel. It did not start in the land of Africa. It did not start in Europe. It did not start in South America, anywhere on the planet except for so-called North America, Babylon the Great. And from here it spread out, and from just speaking words and breaking down scriptures, we become one of the biggest threats on the planet. You know, because the biggest threat, you know, to any organization that deals with deception is the truth. You know, and that's what's happening right now. So it says, "In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai." And this is why we stress so much on those names. The greeting of before we start doing our lessons begins with Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Bahashem Racha Kodash, which Bahashem means in the name. Racha Kodash, Racha is spirit, Kodash is holy. All right, so the Most High in Yahweh's name, in the name of the Holy Spirit. And then throughout the lessons, we mention the names of the Most High and His Son, you know, from time to time, because it's very important to exalt those names, because we're coming to a point where the Lord is going to exalt that name. The world will learn and will know who is responsible, you know, for bringing out, you know, who the God of the heavens is. You know, and that credit is going to go to the Most High Yahweh and His Son Yahweh Shai. Now, I have a an article here that I found online. Like I was listening to the Elder Pastor's video, and what I did was I actually stopped the video to look up some more information on this. So I figured, okay, this is a pretty decent article, so I want to read this and maybe get another precept, and I see where the Spirit leads us. So this is from J Grit. That's J.Grit. It says, "Adventurers. Luis de Torres, Jewish explorer / interpreter. Crew member on Christopher Columbus' 1492 voyage to the New World." Now there are different varying, you know, stories of this man and what happened to him. Some say that he lived happily ever after in Cuba. Others said he got massacred in 1493 when Columbus returned back to the New World because they had stolen some women from the island, you know. And we can't discount that, because Esau is the goddamn devil, and they did a lot of foul shit when they were here. But it says Luis de Torres was employed by Christopher Columbus as an interpreter on his first voyage to the New World. Prior to this, de Torres held a position with Juan Chacon, governor of Murcia, a province where there was a large number of JWO devils, as a Hebrew interpreter, because he was JWO-ish, and this was during the era of the Inquisition. It was necessary for him to convert to Catholicism, which he did the day before the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria set sail on August 2nd, 1492. The voyage also coincided with the expulsion of all JWOs from Spain. Because he was versed in Hebrew, Aramaic, Spanish, Portuguese, French, Latin, and some Arabic, Columbus had thought he would be helpful upon their arrival. Especially useful would be his knowledge of Hebrew and Aramaic, as Columbus fully expected to encounter Asian descendants of the last tribe. It says last tribes of Israel, but it's lost tribes of Israel, which shows you that he knew where he was going. But they have this false narrative that he was going to Asia, going to circumvent the world the other way to go to Asia. No, he knew exactly where he was going. When you watch the movie Conquest of Paradise, 1492 Conquest of Paradise, there were 2 movies that came out that year. Never saw the other one. I'm not sure if that was that actor that played Gotti. Damn, what was that actor's name? I can't think of his name right now. This Italian actor that played Gotti. But I never saw that movie. I wish I could, you know, find that movie. I wouldn't mind watching that one. But the more famous one was 1492 Conquest of Paradise. That was with Gerard Depardieu. You know, which was he's a French actor. He played Columbus. All right, and in that movie, he was speaking with a friar because he wanted an audience with the crown of Spain to receive monies to come, to the, to come to the new world, but they put it under the guise of him going to Asia in a different direction. And the guy said, how could you be so sure that this place even exists? He said it could be no more than 750 leagues, so and so west or whatever the case may be. And he said, and the friar asked him, how can you be so sure? He said the writings of Tuscanelli and so and Esdras. And he said, and the friar said Esdras is a Jew. Now Esdras, who wrote the book of Ezra, wrote the book of First and Second Ezra, also wrote about a prophecy of what would happen to the 10 lost tribes. And Christopher Columbus was all into the scriptures, reading the scriptures. He studied the scriptures. And he knew about the book of Second Ezra. He knew about the 13th chapter. He knew about how the 10 tribes left from Assyria and came to a land where never mankind dwelt before. This is how he knew that there was land over here. And there was many other accounts of it, but they painted as if this guy Christopher Columbus was such a brave soul, and that he actually, just went on an adventure, an exploration adventure, and he hit this side of the world, and it was such a brave feat, and all he did was just follow the guidelines that were already set up. He was learned under Prince Henry the Navigator. He had you had many different maps back then. One of his wife's fathers, I believe it was, had given him a set of maps. I forget exactly. The elder Bishop Tazadakba knows all of that history. If he was to see this video and he would like to do, something on that, he's the expert at it. He speaks about the Piri Reis map, and he speaks about other information that they had out there. Because remember Moab too, they were sailing the seas back then. It was said that the Romans came over to this side of the world, and we know definitely through the Spirit that King Solomon and the Phoenicians came to this side of the world, because the Phoenicians, which are Canaanites, they were experts at sea, navigating. They knew about all the different currents, and how to get to this side of the world, so on and so forth. But I want to read this here in Job 13:4. It says, "But ye are forgers of lies." And that's why you have the fake narrative that Christopher Columbus was looking for a different route or an alternative route to Asia. And he was not. He knew exactly where he was going. So it says, "But ye are forgers of lies, you are all physicians of no value." So going back to the article says, let me read this last part again. Dealing with Luis de Torres, especially useful would be his knowledge of Hebrew and Aramaic, as Columbus fully expected to encounter Asian descendants of the last tribes of Israel, which is the lost tribes of Israel. All right, and he knew, like I said, he knew exactly where he was going. After reaching Cuba, Columbus, believing they had arrived in Asia, sent the Torres on a mission to locate the great cities and riches he had anticipated would be there, and to find the great Khan of Tartary, which is all BS. After traveling for some 60 miles, the Torres and his companions found an Indian village with 50 huts and approximately 1,000 inhabitants. They were greeted with great friendliness and by native women who kissed their hands and feet. The Torres noted a strange custom of the Indians, who would place one end of a burning leaf in their nostrils and inhale the vapors, or place dried leaves into large cane pipes and inhale the smoke. This was the European first encounter with tobacco. At this point, there are radically conflicting versions of what became of the Torres. One such version relates that he was granted land and several slaves, 5 adults and a child, by a native chief, married several daughters of local chiefs. You get the idea. And others say that he was put to death because he was left behind along with 39 other crew members, and they were slaughtered because when Columbus left, they had stolen, or they had kidnapped some of the native women. So they're conflicting, but we know that these devils did a lot of dirt. All right, so let's go from there. Let's go to the Apocrypha, because this history has to be brought out. You have the this is why them so-called Christians like Vocab and them do not like the Apocrypha, because there's too much information in here that links the 12 tribes to the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, and also there's a lot of information out here that brings out who the devil is, man, which are the Edomites. All right, so in 2nd Ezra chapter 13, verse 39, it says, "And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Shalmaneser the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land." And that another land was the land of Assyria. They brought them from Samaria and from those regions up into the land of Assyria. And while there, this is what they did. They said, "But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt." So how did they know about this other country where never mankind dwelt? Well, because they knew about the history of King Solomon, and how King Solomon had a navy, and how King Solomon hired out Hiram, and how Hiram had expert navigators of the sea known as the Phoenicians, because Hiram himself was a Canaanite, and how they had that knowledge, and how they would go to a particular place known as Ophir, and it would take them a year and a half to get to Ophir, and a year and a half to get back, which would make, so every 3 years he would have supplies coming in from this region, because it took that long to get across, from one point to the other. Remember, they didn't have motorized boats back then. They didn't have planes and helicopters and quicker modes of transportation. Everything was slow back then. All right. So it says, "But they took never mankind dwelt." It says, so how did they know about that? Because they knew about King Solomon. And where is this place where never mankind dwelt? You can't say it's up there where Georgia, Russia, in that area, because people knew about that region of land there. You had people living in those areas. You had the Scythians, which were Jakes. You had I believe the Parthians weren't too far from that area. You had different tribes of people, Germanic tribes, that were living all through those areas. So it wasn't talking about there. You can't say it was talking about Africa, because you had a bunch of Hamites down in Africa, So you can't. So where is this place that never mankind dwelt? This is a question that these guys cannot answer. It says that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land, and we see a evidence of that, in that the explorers that came to this side of the world, were able to discern that these people have to be Jews, have to be Israelites, because of their customs and their language and certain things that they do. Right? It says, "And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over." Right? Because the Lord held back. Because when you at sea, there are storms, there are hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons. You have currents, and if you don't know how to navigate those currents, you can destroy the ship. Remember what happened to the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul, and them, they were going. He was going to go appeal to Caesar, and when they were in the Mediterranean Sea, the ship ran aground, because there was a great storm, but the Lord held those storms and held all of that back, and allowed Jake to navigate through those currents to be able to come over to this side of the world, because prophecy had to be fulfilled. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. And it just so happens that to get to this place where never mankind dwelt, that took a year and a half, just so happens to be the same amount of time that the Phoenicians, which was the navy that King Solomon hired from Hiram, also took a year and a half to get to that particular land. All right, so it all comes together. It says, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth. Now Arsareth is pretty much the word is jumbled up, which means another land. All right. And then when you go to Deuteronomy 29 and 29, I believe it is, it also speaks about another land. And when you go to that in the Hebrew, matter of fact, let me see if I can pull that up real quick. This is the book of Deuteronomy 29:29. Let me see if that's it. I think it's a little bit above that. Right. 28. Deuteronomy 29:28. And the Lord Yahweh rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land, as it is written. Now, when you look up this word, another land, right? Another is the word achar, and then land in this case is arataza, achar arataza, ar sereth, achar arataza, ar sereth, achar arataza, ar sereth, another land. So they sound similar because that's what it means, another land, another place or another region where they went to. So it says, for through that, back in 2nd Ezra 13:45, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth, or another land. This is another name for America. Okay? Then dwelt they there unto the latter time. What latter time? The latter times when the other three tribes were to come over here, and this would be where the Lord would come and gather that peaceable multitude, which are the elected nation of Israel of all 12 tribes, from Judah all the way down to Issachar and everything else in between, the elect of them. It says, then dwell they there unto the latter time, and now, when they shall begin to come, meaning when the other tribes will be brought over to the side of the world, the highest shall stay the springs of the stream again. Right, that they may go through, therefore sawest thou the multitude with peace. Right, so those are the 12 tribes being gathered together here. And it's no coincidence that it says that the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel would be oppressed together. Ever since the taking down of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians, there wasn't really a union of all 12 tribes with the southern kingdom. You did have some of the other northern kingdom among them, but not all of them. No, so this would take place later on in history, in the prophecy. And that is fulfilled when you bring everything up to date here in America, where you had the northern kingdom from Canada all the way down to South America and everything in between, catching hell from the Spaniards, from the French, from the British, from all these devils. Then after they conquered this side of the world, in process of time, they brought over the southern kingdom over to this side of the world. And from that point on, Jake was suffering what they would have to suffer to pay for their sins also. And then eventually it will come to the point where the trumpet will be blown once again in the last days. And a man by the name of Elder Abba Bibbins that was teaching what we teach right now worldwide, and that's how the tribes started coming back together and being gathered back together as one. This is why you had during the 60s, you had, the same problem that you had in the so-called Negro community, you had in the so-called Latino community, you had in the so-called Native American Indian community, and that was that there was a great injustice being done. And that's when the bones in Ezekiel 37 started coming together, bone to his bone, but they didn't have the breath in them. But at that time, while they were coming together with that same purpose, you also had the truth that was being taught out there by Elder Abba Bibbins and the men that he gathered through the Spirit to be able to continue to push this word out, which we're teaching today, which happened to be the breath that would enter into these bones later on and stand upon their feet. This great, exceeding great army. And these devils are getting nervous now. So when Columbus came over to the side of the world, there's a reason why he brought the Hebrew interpreter over here and others with him, because he knew that he was going to encounter the 10 lost tribes of the nation of Israel. All right? So don't let them fool you and tell you that no, he didn't know where he was going. He thought he was going to Asia. No, he didn't. He knew exactly where he was going. He was coming to the 10 tribes. This is why he had that Hebrew interpreter with him. You know, and he's heard and he read the scriptures of the land of Ophir and all the great riches and the gold and the silver. Because what did they do when they get here? When they got here, looking for the silver, looking for the gold, looking for the riches, and that's all these devils did when they came to this side of the world. Because this is Ophir, you know. So all the receipts are there, and the receipts bear witness. And there's so many receipts that there's no receipts of these rats being the Israelites. You know, you have declarations. You have, they don't even have proof that they're the Israelites. You know, but here is the proof that the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians are the Israelites is so overwhelming. The receipts are bubbling over, but yet they still won't acknowledge it. Why? Because we would not be recognized. We would not be reckoned because they hid that truth from us and they don't want us to know that truth. And when you wake up to the truth, you make yourself a major target to these devils, So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.